over the next 6 days, I'll be releasing the top 6 episodes of 2023. It's been an amazing year of learning, of great interviews and conversations, of meditations and affirmations. It's been a wonderful space to share with you. I can't thank you enough for listening. This episode was particularly interesting as we talked about the felt seen polyvagal model, learning how to reset our nervous system with Jan Winhall. This is episode number 6, according to your downloads and listens. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Trauma, dysregulated emotions, high levels of stress and anxiety all have a way of rewiring and changing your nervous system. The changes are so significant that they cause dis-ease as you witness and carry your dis-ease. They also cause coping mechanisms and self-harm and a host of other significant life impacts. Yet there is a way to retrain the nervous system and your relationship to your experiences. I sat down with trauma and addiction therapist, Polyvagal Institute Course Developer and partner, teacher, and author Jan Winhall to talk about how to shift out of fight, flight, fold, and freeze, and how to connect with yourself and change what can keep you from enjoying your life. So let's dive right in. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. So if you are a normal, regular listener here on the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, you have heard us talk so often about the nervous system, about how trauma impacts us, how we can easily get into a space of fight, flight, or freeze, and have a hard time getting out. So today, I'm so excited to talk to Jan Winhall to talk about the nervous system, about polyvagal theory. As you are really an expert, Jan, will you please introduce yourself and kind of tell us how you got into this space?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a trauma therapist, have been for many years, 45 years now. I'm an educational partner and a course developer with the Polyvagal Institute. So I work closely with Steve Porges. I published a paper with him, which people can look up on my website if you want to after at janwinhall.com. And the paper was specifically about my book about addiction. So I wrote a book in 2021 called Treating Trauma and Addiction with the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model. And basically what I did was to bring together the work that I had been doing before I found polyvagal theory, which was working with the felt sense, Gene Gendlin's work, which has become more known and kind of a little more popular now. People talk much more about the felt sense now than they did before. People don't really understand that so well either. They often think of it as physical sensation.
Yeah.
So we can chat a little bit more about that. But I got into that because originally I was working with a group of young women fresh out of graduate school. And they were incest survivors. And back then, we didn't talk very much about trauma, hardly at all. Now everybody talks about trauma.
Right.
It's really quite funny for us that have been in this business for a long time. Right. It's wonderful, really. It's wonderful. But back then, we didn't have a lot of really sophisticated ways of treating trauma.
Right.
So I got interested in trying to figure out what was going on with these young women. I began to hunt around and I found Gendlin's work in working with the body and with addiction.
Right.
And that's how it all began. These women really taught me a lot about what was going on for them in their bodies, because there was a lot of cutting and a lot of self-harm. And back then, and a lot, to a large extent now, I think it's pretty pathologized. But For me, when I really listened to what they were telling me, on some level, they understood that it helped them. And
Yes.
we couldn't explain it, but they knew that it helped them because after it happened, after they did it, they felt a sense of numbing and relief. So it became an addiction because it worked to take away pain. So that's really where it started for me.
Wow.
And it was a paradox, right? It was like, how can something that hurts you help you? And that got me very, very curious. So that's how it started.
Brilliant. You just described what many people understand and certainly have listened to this podcast and know as a coping mechanism. And many people don't quite understand exactly what you described was, if I do something that is harmful to me, how could it make me feel better? Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because again, that's something obviously in private session, they get much more in depth and understand why. But generally, we don't understand how we could be hurting ourselves yet feel better. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I do in my book. That's was really my work, was to try to figure that out, that paradox.
Yeah.
So what I came to was a couple of things over the years. Bessel van der Kolk was also very curious about this, and he wrote about it in The Body Keeps the Score. Wonderful book. If people haven't read it.
Is.
It's, it's an iconic book, right? And he talked about, explained how endogenous opioids are released in the body, right? When you cut the body. And this brings a sense of numbing and relief, just the way that it does if you're using opioids to numb pain.
Right.
Judith Herman also talked about it. She said, abused kids learn that strong jolts to the body bring a sense of relief.
Right.
So endogenous opioids, that began to make more sense to me. It also explained a kind of reenactment of trauma, or this old idea of masochism.
Yes.
No, it's not that we're masochistic, that we hate ourselves, that we're looking for attention, this whole borderline personality thing that women were and still are really labeled and denigrated by, I believe.
Right. Agreed.
Because it's so pathologizing. This way of understanding was, okay, now we have to get into the body.
Yeah.
Trauma happens in the body, not just up here.
Right.
And what happens in the body affects the prefrontal cortex. Yep. So those things began to help me to understand how bodies work and how bodies have ways of helping us when we're under stress. And those ways are misunderstood as pathologizing rather than a way of coping in a context that isn't safe.
Right.
So that kind of language came for me back in around 2012 when I went to hear Steve Porges talk, and also Dan Siegel, interpersonal neurobiology work. That was kind of the next wave that helped me to sort of understand, bringing neurobiology into it and understanding, bodies are physiological. We need to understand and get a little more comfortable with that in the work that we do, right? It's psychological and we're physiological, we're neurophysiological. So when I heard Steve talk, it all kind of began to really make sense.
Yeah.
That through the nervous system. We knew back 40 years ago, as feminist therapists, we all talked about safety.
Right.
There was nothing new about that in my circle, our circle, but we didn't talk about it in terms of the autonomic nervous system.
Right. Can we stop right there for just a second?
Yeah.
Let's break that down. Let's break those terms down so that someone who is not familiar, who is hearing this and saying, oh, wow, I just heard that I am really kind of creating this space for myself, these coping mechanisms that are doing harm, but there's a reason why. And there's a physiological body reaction that's happening. Can we break down the nervous system for just a moment before we dive deeper?
Yeah. So the traditional notion of the nervous system before Steve Porges was that there was, this ventral branch of the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is what kind of, monitors safety, right? This sense of, The autonomic nervous system is all about, am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe?
Right.
And it's unconscious. We don't think about it, right? So when things are okay and there is enough safety, the body is relaxed, this part of the vagus nerve, cranial nerve that is above the diaphragm, and it comes up into the face, and it's active, and we're humming along in our lives, and we're smiling, and we're socially engaged with each other because the nerve comes right up through the face, and things are pretty okay, you know. But in trauma, and for the women that I was working with, they grew up in trauma.
Right.
Their nervous system is wired differently. So in the old model, there was this ventral branch that was, you know, enough safety, and then the sympathetic branch that we all know in terms of flight, fight. So things are moving along, things are fine, and then maybe there's a loud noise that happens, and the body will automatically, right, unconsciously shift into a different branch of the nervous system called the sympathetic branch.
Right.
And then we either fight to try to mobilize to deal with it, or we flight to get out of there. And those were the two branches that people talked about and still do a lot.
Yeah.
What Steve's work did is he said, wait a minute. He did some studies with premature babies. It's very fascinating stuff. I got all into that and wrote about it. And what he discovered was that these premature babies that were really sick, you would think if there's these two branches of the nervous system, that they'd be in sympathetic response with the heart rates going up, right? When you're in flight, fight, your heart rate elevates to mobilize, but they weren't. Their heart rates were actually lower than a regular beat. And he got very interested in that and started doing some research. And that really was the beginning of his paradox, because he had a paradox too. His was also about the ventral branch of the vagus nerve. He's like, wait a minute, this can't really, if there's just safety and then this flight fight, where does this space that these babies are occupying live in the nervous system? So he then basically brought this, what he named dorsal branch of the vagus, into a new model of the autonomic nervous system.
Brilliant way to break that down. And what we're really talking about is an entire system that works to keep us safe, to give us an identification of what's happening around us and within us. And so this has major impact, and most people don't realize that this has major impact of how we kind of see the world, how we operate within the world. So you are exposed to this theory, to this understanding, and it must have been mind-blowing as you're pulling all of these pieces in together and realize we have a bigger responsibility to teach.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't me, I mean, all trauma therapists, really, most of us. I mean, we're just like, it's revolutionary to be able to understand this dorsal branch of the vagus and what it looks like in the body shape, right? Because every state in the nervous system has a shape, right? Our bodies, when we're in a socially engaged, safe place, we can sit up. We look out into the world. We like to connect with people like we're doing right now.
Right.
But if I go into fight, I'm pissed. Right? Look at that. It's tight. It's constricted. Right? If I go to flight, I'm getting out of here. I'm going the other way. And then in the dorsal branch that Steve named, bodies fold in and hide. This is the shame state.
Right.
This is the dissociated state. And this is what, as trauma therapists, we always saw.
Right.
Because, you know, it's hierarchical. You first go to flight, fight, but if you can't get out and you can't manage and fight your way through it or run, then the body shuts down into the dorsal branch, which is, and I want to clarify this for people because they get it wrong, and we're trying to really educate people around this in the nervous system. So there is a freeze state. We call it, you know, we often talk about flight, fight, freeze, but the state after freeze
Mm-hmm.
is the dorsal branch of shutdown. I call it
Right.
fold.
Yeah.
Freeze is the place in between
Mm-hmm.
flight, fight, and shutting down. And it's the place where, in my work, I named that this is the place where addictions occur.
Agreed 100%. This is also the place where those who don't have more advanced language will say, I am stuck.
Yeah, it's a stuck place. I call it
Yeah.
fixate. I
Yes.
made a model. I'm a very visual person. So people, please feel, go to my website. You can download all kinds of things. But I made a graphic model of the nervous system that we called with my clients. We call it the 6 Fs.
Mm.
And in that freeze state, we call it fixate because it is a very addictive, stuck place. It's like you're going nowhere fast, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a rut.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that self-harm that becomes addictive, these behaviors function as state regulation strategies. So a simple way to describe it would be you come home from work and you've had a really stressful day. You're in flight. You cannot settle yourself down. Everybody knows this state, right? I have a little bit of it sometimes these days because I'm doing so many things and so many new things.
Right.
And so it's irritating. It's hard to go to sleep. It's hard to eat. It's drink a bottle of wine.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect way to move into then what we call fold or the shutdown dorsal state that Steve named.
Right.
Functions very well. Now, cutting is an interesting one. It's less obvious than alcohol. People kind of get that. But with cutting, there is this release of endogenous opioids that shift you into a dorsal state.
Right.
But at the same time, if you listen to people who do it, they'll tell you that some people do it to shift back into sympathetic. Because say, for example, the sight of blood wakes them up and stimulates them with this jolt in the body.
Right. Yeah.
So this we call the trauma feedback loop, the place that moves back and forth between sympathetic to dorsal, shutting down to jolting up, back and forth and back and forth when there isn't enough safety.
Right. It's so important what you just said. It's something that obviously I teach, but it's something that so many people don't understand. We talk so much about, especially from my standpoint, about how our thoughts are leading to our feelings are moving to our actions and back and forth. But that loop of trauma is so essential to talk about. And it is so necessary and not talked about enough. We just say, oh, there's trauma. What is the trauma doing? What is the impact of that, the back and forth in our nervous system, and how dysregulating that is in and of itself?
Yeah.
Thoughts on, obviously, we're talking about cutting, about the bottle of wine, ways that we can get ourselves out of that space. It's so important, a lot of times we'll talk about, well, physical exercise or do some of these things. But when we're in that trauma loop, those things are sometimes impossible.
Yeah. So before we go there, we will go there.
Yeah.
I want to just emphasize one more concept in polyvagal theory that's really important. It's what Steve calls the intervening variable. Sounds scary for some people. But what he means by that is really simply that whatever state you're in your nervous system determines how you experience the world.
Right.
This is key for people to understand.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I'm feeling pretty comfortable and grounded, I'm walking down the street, things are pretty good. Somebody bumps into me. So I'm in the ventral branch of the vagus here, the grounded place. Somebody bumps into me. My experience of that is probably, they just weren't looking. It's don't worry about it. It's fine. I carry on. But if I'm walking down the street and I'm in fight and somebody bumps into me, I'm really annoyed.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the world is that people are stupid. And what is wrong with you? Why don't you look where you're going? And it's a totally different flavor in your life.
Yeah.
And we really need to understand that as therapists to teach to our clients, because it's crucial in terms of then helping people to develop daily practices, because that's what it takes.
Right.
To be mindful of where you have to shift your thinking. So it's a bottom-up, top-down model, right? We understand what's going on in the body, and we also, from a top-down place, talk to ourselves.
Right.
And practice what Steve calls neural exercises, which can sound scary and whatever. But really what that means is it might be things like meditation,
right,
or a focusing practice that we can touch on, or playing the piano, or it could be things like dancing.
Right.
Things that bring us into social connection with other people that are enjoyable.
Right. Let's do that in just a moment, like you just said, because you brought my mind into that space of really talking about where we are and how we're perceiving everything, because we all know that perception is 100% how we're focusing and how our mindset is. I will often ask the women that I work with, I want you to be very, very clear about your response. And that will tell us where you are in the nervous system, where you are in your engagement and your inactions. It's so important. And I think that a lot of people don't think about that. If a simple bump in on the sidewalk is causing you to have this massive reaction, it's time to do some self-discovery. Yeah. Do you find that a lot of people give you a lot of resistance when you talk about that, or when you're teaching that to someone, that they don't want to get into that space of really identifying where they are?
I find that when you start with the premise that so much of behavior is determined by how safe we feel,
right,
and we are, and that our behavior is such a reflection of how safe we feel in our bodies, and that these behaviors that appear to be weird or maladaptive, I talk about them as adaptive in a context that's maladaptive, not a person.
Right.
So when I do that, when we do that through the polyvagal lens, people feel freer. They feel that it's what they're doing and how they're behaving is less personalized. It's like this, I often say, this is how bodies behave. Bodies will find addictions when there's no alternative, and it's a good thing they did because it kept you alive.
Right.
Now it's a problem because you're stuck in the feedback loop and the trigger. But when it formed, thank goodness it formed. Which is actually, can sound outrageous, but it's actually very close to Indigenous culture and how they understand addictions.
I think just that statement of alone is so powerful. This allowed me to stay alive. And it takes the shame and blame away.
Yeah, completely. Right? And then you can say, you know, what's so hard about changing it is that the very thing you learn to do to survive by self-harm that took you to dissociation is now the very thing you have to change.
Right.
And bodies are confused. And this is where the top-down comes in. The CBT stuff, all of the teaching, a lot of psychoed. But so that's one of the things I start with early on, because it's my passion. It's what I believe. It's what I knew from the very beginning, that all this misogyny was not true. I just listened to these young women. And really, I mean, can you imagine what would they have done without dissociation? It's a gift from the body.
It is, from the brain, from the body, from every piece of you, and mind, body, soul, to be able to step out for just a moment. And that's really what we're talking about. We're stepping away, allowing ourselves to survive. A lot of women will go through their trauma, will get into that space where we're trying to identify the patterns. And they'll say, do you hate me? Well, I don't have any personal connection to your pain. right? But you do. And do you hate you? Right.
Mhm.
And well, yeah, I do. You shouldn't. You shouldn't hate yourself. You have done whatever you had to be where you are. And now we change the pattern, the brain pattern, the biofeedback, the body feeling.
Mhm.
And so let's maybe get back into that a little bit, is getting into that feeling the body, feeling
The
what's
felt sense
happening.
part of it, yeah.
Yes,
So the
yes.
model that I created is basically a way of bringing embodiment into any form of therapy that you're doing.
Mm,
And it uses two natural processes in the body. One is neuroception, which is
hmm.
Steve Porges' word for this process in the body of checking to see, am I safe, am I not safe? This
Right.
unconscious process that we can make more conscious through
Hmm.
practicing, right?
Right.
And the other natural process is interoception.
Yeah.
It's connecting down into what am I feeling in my body and what are the memories connected to that? Where does it sit in my body
Mhm.
physically? So this is Gendlin's work. Brilliant guy. He got really interested in what produces change for people. This was
Right.
way back in the 1950s. He was a student of Carl Rogers, who's a
Yes.
famous American psychologist.
Hmm.
So Gene was a student of his at the University of Chicago. And they did these studies with process recordings
Hmm.
of therapist and client sessions where they both reported positive outcomes.
Right.
And what they found were there were these long pauses where nobody was talking. And he got really interested and started asking people what was going on there. And basically what the clients described was that they were kind of taking in where they were, slowing everything down and connecting in with how it all feels in the body. So
Hmm.
for example, right now, I have a kind of warmth in my belly and a little tightness up here in my upper chest because I'm on air, you know? So
Right.
there's a little bit of sympathetic energy, but lots of
Mhm.
ventral calm, enjoying energy as well, enjoying
Right.
connecting with you and whatever. And so we would then stay with that.
Right.
And what happens when you stay with anything in the body that feels really great, or particularly in therapy when we're working on issues,
Hmm.
often these things are constricted or they're limp and shut down.
Right.
So we start bringing together, well, what state am I in? Well, I would be a blend of ventral and sympathetic right
Hmm.
now, right?
Hmm.
Feel pretty good, like I'm grounded, but there's also some fired up energy in there. And then I might want to spend some more time with that and just notice more about what does it need, or is there something in there that I'm not paying attention to? And there probably is. It's like
Hmm.
working too much, working too hard, what. So
Yes.
then you could go into that some more. And what Jen
Hmm.
found, and what we all know, it's like if you are upset about something and you find a friend
Hmm.
that you feel safe with, that
Yes.
can listen to you. So we focus in partnerships.
Right.
The partner says back what's happening for you.
Hmm.
And as you pay attention, it opens. And often people will have a good cry.
Yeah. Mm.
And then you have what Jen called the felt shift in the body.
Yes.
Oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
Nothing's really changed, but it's changed in your body
Yes.
because you've shifted. What I began to then put together was you've shifted neurophysiological states
Hmm.
from maybe a tight sympathetic into a physical release that Gendlin saw in the
Hmm.
body
Hmm.
that I then kind of put together and asked Steve Porges, do you think this is a shift in autonomic state? And he's like, yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then when I went hunting around in Gendlin's work, I actually found that he did 3 studies on the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. Mm.
So he didn't take it further because he was a philosopher, but he
Right.
saw the physical release
The
in the
release.
body.
Hmm.
And that release is what we pay attention to
Mm-hmm.
as a focusing oriented therapist, an
Right.
embodied therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the model kind of weaves together in these two embodied practices.
Yeah. I know when I work with somebody and we're talking about trauma, the very first thing that I do, and I mention this for anyone who doesn't have the opportunity to work with a therapist, and you're trying to do all of these things on your own, which really is the base of the show, is to give you a space to come to and find some tools that work for you
Mhm.
if you don't have the opportunity. One of the very first things I will often do is say, please put your hand over your heart and really gauge, just like you were talking about,
Yeah.
where do I feel this? Can I feel my heartbeat? Can I feel that connection with the body? Because
Yeah.
so often when we are in a dysregulated state, we don't have that connection with the body. It's not felt or seen. The other thing that you mentioned was crying. And
Mhm.
so many people try to stifle their tears. They don't want to feel it, especially men.
Mhm.
Your husbands, your dads, your boyfriends, all the people in your life that are male have been told men don't cry. Real men don't cry. This is such a beautiful shift in the nervous system. Allow the tears to be. It is such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and it brings a real release
Hmm.
that then we know if we quiet down, we start to know that that process is what we need to follow. The
Hmm.
body wisdom.
Right.
Bodies know the right next step unless they're stuck in a trauma feedback loop. And then
Hmm.
it's our job. So I really encourage people to develop daily practices. We have a way of doing that again, you can download on my website. And it's a very behavioral kind of tool to
Hmm.
use to remind yourself, what are the things I can do that bring grounded ventral energy
Yeah.
into my life? So that
Hmm.
then when you're kind of figuring out, where am I in my nervous system and what do I need to do, you
Right.
have this way of kind of visual reminders. And when we do these daily practices, we're actually, really building these new neural pathways
Hmm.
so that it becomes easier and easier to find our way into a space that feels more safe and connected and integrated.
I would love for you to share some of those with us if you would. I do want to say this. You said daily practices.
Mhm.
Important to point out those words. I am a meditation teacher myself, and I will often teach, especially those who are moving through heavy trauma, that that's something that we can use. Breath is a beautiful reset of our
Yes,
nervous
yeah.
system. One of the biggest things I hear is, well, I did it. I did it for 3, 4 months and then I stopped because I felt better, but I'm right back into the place that I was before. It's called a
Mhm.
daily practice for a reason. When we
Mhm.
stop doing the things that work for us, guess what? The things that don't have a way of coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And what helps a lot, I find, is in our community, we focus in partnerships. So you
Mm,
have a kind of accountability and
yeah,
a social engagement with another person.
right.
And so often people will meet in my trainings. They'll meet once a week.
Mm,
I train therapists, but therapists do their own work in the
right.
training.
Mm,
So they might meet once a week with their partner, but then they're also checking in with these visuals of we call it the 4 circle practice and the autonomic nervous system 6 F's. You're looking at these every morning when you get up. Where am I in my nervous system? And what have I got coming on my plate today? And what do I need to
mm,
do to stay a little more focused and grounded? So you look at,
right.
what are the things that I do? And you've got some of them listed there already.
Yeah.
And you use this as a cue. And then once a week, you have a kind of accountability with your partner. How did it
Mm,
go? You know?
right.
And often when people fall away from it, it's because a trigger has happened
Right.
and they've fallen back into the old trauma loop. And then when you're in there, it's like, it's dark,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody has to come and find you.
Yeah. I
And
love
if you have a partner, this is brilliant. If you have a focusing partner, they'll find you. If you don't show up that day for focusing, it's like, where are you? So co-regulation is another big part of polyvagal theory. We thrive together in relationship, right?
I will often hear people say, but I don't have someone. And that's so not true. It's so not true. You may feel like you're alone, but you do have someone. I know that personally for me, find me on Instagram. I'm going to answer your DMs. I'm going to try to hold your hand. There's a huge community there. I know that there's a huge community within Polyvagal. There's so many places that you can go for someone to help and get into that state of co-regulation. You mentioned a word. We use it here a lot. We hear it a lot. It's become the buzzword across social media, triggers. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because obviously when we're triggered, our nervous system goes into dysregulation as well.
Yeah, we fall back into that trauma feedback loop of flight, fight, fixate, and fold, right? So, we work with triggers again once a person feels safe enough to connect into the body. So that's a whole journey in and of itself, right? Because it's not safe to be in your body when it's being traumatized.
Right.
Of course it's not. We normalize that. Why would you do that to yourself? So it's a slow coming back into the body. Learning how to help people to do that is a very important skill. And then as you're kind of doing that, I talk about these 4 avenues into a really integrated felt sense place inside. And one of them is memory. So I may be describing, this guy bumped into me and, I can't stop thinking about it. It's just like my body's just trembling and I'm afraid. I can't go to sleep. I don't know what's going on. But the body remembers.
Yeah.
Right? Find a way of kind of teaching people, and you'll know this through meditation, how to have this kind of dual awareness. There's one part of you that's experiencing these dysregulated states and triggers, and cultivating this other part that is kindly observing.
Yes.
Stepping beside. So Jenna would call it getting the right amount of distance, closeness from an activated place.
Right.
And, that's a lot of work, right? All of that takes time.
It is. It is. I will often say, if you can't sit with it, try to put it on the movie screen. Try to watch it, right? Try to watch it like you are. Yeah. Just try to watch it.
Put it beside you or throw it in the ocean. It needs to go that far.
Yeah, exactly. Get it away if you need to.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important that we realize that just because something comes up doesn't mean that there's not a way out. And that was really what I wanted to talk about today, was getting reset, right? How do we get back into that grounded space?
So you develop a number of ways that you like. You mentioned breathing. So if you're somebody that tends to live in sympathetic, you could practice some breathing where you're extending the exhalation breath, make it part of your daily practice. If you're somebody that lives a lot in dorsal, you want to go the other way to extending the inhalation breath. Get up and move. So learning what you need to do in each nervous system state to help yourself to become more grounded. So for a lot of our people, it's a dorsal state of immobilization. You're in bed and you're stuck there, right? So we say, even though the body is stuck there, you need to get up and go for a walk and call a friend.
Right.
Reach out to another human being. So a lot of these things are very simple things, but they're hard to do when you're in a different state, a dysregulated state. So, if you build in this practice every day I'm going to play the piano for 20 minutes. Every day I'm going to make sure I have eye contact with somebody. It could be the corner store guy. It doesn't matter. It's just start.
Right.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And try your best, and try with another person. Makes it a lot easier. And as you said, community is everything, right?
It is.
In Canada now, we've never had forest fires like we have. I'm in Toronto. I'm
Mm-hmm.
Canadian. And it's unbelievable. And everybody that you hear talking about going through the experience, they all say that community is what
Mm-hmm.
is getting them through.
Right. Yeah.
That's polyvagal theory. That's social engagement, right? That's
Yes.
connection, which
Yes.
is the opposite of a trauma response because
Mm-hmm.
connection has hurt you.
Yeah. And if you're in this state, if you're in this place where connection is difficult and you're in a state of that feedback loop, if you are just mindful enough to start looking for community, you will make all the difference in the mindset too. This is one thing that I know I've taught my own children. It's something that I do out on my own daily walks or runs. There's a lot of people that will sit. I live in a beautiful area that's got all these walking trails. They'll sit on these rocks and kind of wait and watch people go by. And I'll often stop. How are you today? How are things? There's a very sweet woman that she's in her 90s that walks, and now we
Mhm.
hug. It's these things. You don't have to have long engagement to create
Yeah,
change.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's very, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the body's really like that
Yeah.
connection and smiling. And if
Yeah.
we're engaged enough to take it
Mhm.
in, you know,
Right. Oh, that's a big point.
the
If we're
tricky
engaged
one.
enough, if we're engaged enough to take it in, that's a huge, huge point. Is there some way that comes to mind for you and in your research and teaching that we can do that in, just like I was saying, a very simple way where we're engaging with community, or some way to reset other than getting out there? Maybe somebody's homebound or they don't have that ability to get into community. Is there another way?
Well, I mean, we have to get into community some way
Mhm.
or another. If you're homebound, you got to find a way to get into community online. Even if we're, super restricted, getting up and moving, walking
Mhm.
outside, looking at the sun, breathing, and making eye contact with another human being
Right.
is a very powerful way. Being in
Mhm.
nature, prayer is important for some people,
Yes.
very important. Dance, singing, things that bring you into movement and connection.
Mhm.
We have that's the way really to go. And so, you know, being finding a way to do that with another human being,
Yeah.
that's
That's it.
gold.
It's key. Yeah. I can hear the questions that are coming in. I'm pretty attuned at this point as to
Know
what's
your
going to be
audience.
asked. Yeah, what's going to be asked. And I can hear one of the questions being, what if I feel like I can't ever get out of that loop? What would you say?
Well, I think that's common, right? That
Yeah.
people feel they can never get out of it.
Yeah.
Can you find somebody to be in company with you in that place, in that feeling?
Mm.
Don't try to change it. Just find another person that can be with you
Mm-hmm.
with that feeling
Mm-hmm.
and help you to notice what nervous system state you're in that feeling, because that's a
Mm-hmm.
feeling that's in dorsal.
Right. Yeah.
So I call it stinking thinking,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
So first, when somebody comes to me with that and they do, it's like, yeah, I get that place. Let's
Yeah.
be there together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then can we make a little bit of distance from it? You and me together. Can we back up from it a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So there's you and me, and there is this place. That's the titrating. It's one way of doing it.
Right.
Finding a place in the body that feels okay. It doesn't feel like that. It
Right.
might be the tip of your nose. It might be your earlobe. Can
Mm.
you bring your attention there to that place? We have a practice in focusing called clearing space backwards.
Mm.
So you look for a place in your life, one moment, one little experience that feels okay. So it might be a little exchange you had with a friend a year ago.
Mm.
You bring your attention to that place And if you can, you bring it down into the center of your body and you notice what happens there. And then you work with it. So over time, we develop these resources of felt senses where it feels okay. It doesn't even have to feel wonderful. It's just, it feels okay in this moment. And we often use body cards. So people draw on a body shape the color and the sensation and the imagery to activate this right hemisphere, right?
Right.
Of what that place, that little moment that just felt okay, what it feels like in your body. And then in step 3 in focusing, there's 6 steps that Jan Winhall created to help people connect into the body, is what we call finding a handle. So you ask into the body, is there a word or an image or a phrase that really captures the essence of this okay moment? And, you know, it could be something like warm and yellow, billowy and blue, or whatever. The body is poetry often from the body.
Yes.
And then making a body card and using those as cues, visual cues. So you might say to yourself today, I'm never getting out of this. I just keep going around and around. I keep drinking too much wine. I keep cutting myself. I keep going out with shitty guys. I keep doing whatever. And then you kind of say that handle. Say, can't find it. Okay, you can't find it, but let's notice it. Let's just notice, it was right there in your body there, right there. Just maybe put a hand where it was. And after a while, sometimes, you know, a little bit of it starts to come. We have many ways of working with the body to invite some kind of energy. And sometimes it's simply being in the company of another person who can bear what you're feeling and not try to change it.
The most important words spoken, not try to change it. We're trained to try to make people feel okay when we're not comfortable. And we have to be uncomfortable sometimes.
I call that the hot potato.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think it's so moving when, you know, people will say, you know, I can't tell you. It's too horrible. I don't want to tell you. Then you're going to have it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that to you. And that's so lovely.
Yeah.
The care there, right? But, you know, I say, well, I've heard a lot and it's got to come out. If it needs to come out, we can bear it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I try to do a lot of things, healthy things, to wash it, swoosh it away, smudge it away afterwards, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. But sometimes we just have to be present with what it is and not let the person get gobbled up by it.
Yeah. There are people that want to hold your hand and are trained to hold your hand and want you to experience the best and find grounded regulation. There is so much more we can talk about. I hope that we can do this again because I feel like we just scratched the surface and I am so intrigued by having further conversations. I want you, if possible, to give us where we can get all of these downloads again, and then where someone could find you on social media, and then I'll ask my last question.
So you can find everything really at janwinhall.com. There's lots of downloads of some of the things that we talked about, the body cards, the models, the 4-circle practice we sort of touched on, whatever. And I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, but mostly my website and Polyvagal Institute. I have 3 courses there now.
Perfect.
That I'm training people in the felt sense polyvagal model, and all over the place. I'm off to Oxford on Saturday, so there's a big trauma conference there. So
amazing. It sounds like I have some courses to sign up for too, because I am always in the state of learning all the time to help the people.
That'd be wonderful.
I would love that. Yes.
Yeah, I would love it too. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I have enjoyed ours as well. Again, I hope that you'll come back on.
I will.
Thank you. I end our conversation the same way with every guest that I speak with, and I hope that you'll honor us with this as well. I ask for your 3 gratitudes. And the reason why is because we end in a state of appreciation, which is so beautiful for our nervous system. So, Jan, would you please share with us 3 things that you are abundantly grateful for?
Oh, what a beautiful question. I love it. I'm grateful for my family.
Yeah.
My amazing kids and my partner. They're amazing. I'm very grateful for that, and they're healthy.
Yes.
That's, so important. And my friends and my new friends at Polyvagal Institute.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful, and I don't take it for granted at all, the platform that I've been given to teach.
Right.
That's a real honor to have a microphone as a woman who's going to be 70 in a month is pretty amazing, right?
Wow.
Isn't that pretty amazing? Because most of the time as women, when we get older, we get even more invisible.
Right.
So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also really grateful for my work. Like I've just in latter years really discovered how much I love writing. And I'm good at it.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm writing I just finished another chapter for a Norton book on the science of embodiment. And I'm writing a new book on basically a workbook that has 18 practices that really take the therapist and the client through the practice of developing this felt sense polyvagal healing journey.
I'm excited for that.
So that's my next thing that I'm working on. I'm trying to get it done early in the new year. So.
Give us the name of your first book again, please.
It's a mouthful. Treating Trauma and Addiction with the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model. Perfect. It's available on my website. There's a 20% discount there.
Okay, so go there. I cannot thank you enough, Jan, for your expertise, for what you're sharing with the world, for the work that you're doing, and giving us time today to understand that we all have the power to shift and reset. And it's not necessarily as difficult as some will make it out to be. Yes, it's work, but it's always possible. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
There are so many beautiful takeaways from this conversation. So many, in fact, that I'm not even sure that you can grab onto all of them by only listening to this episode once. I know I have personally listened to it multiple times, and many of the things that we talked about are things that I teach, but there's so many great takeaways. If you're interested in learning more, you can find that felt seen polyvagal model that Jan and I were talking about on her website at janwinhall.com. That's JANWINHALL.com. Once you're there, you're going to find many beautiful resources to help you change your relationship with trauma and how to really get into a space where you can change your response in the nervous system. You can also check out Jan's book while you're there. This conversation, again, is so impactful. I look forward to bringing Jan back onto the show so we can deep dive more. If you have questions you would like us to answer, please feel free to email them to us at getyourlifetogethergirlnow@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life and are seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, YouTube, and now Threads. You can also visit the show notes, my blog, and even have a one-on-one session and courses on my website at Get Your Life Together Girl. I'd love for you to share this episode with family member or friends as it helps us spread the message to those who need it most. You can also check out my new 15-day affirmation course on Insight Timer and find a host of other meditations, insights, and conversations there. It's all linked in my show notes. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.